Christmas might be over, but I got plenty of gifts for you today. 7 decks that ran top tables, several that won events, and lots to be explored in this week's meta report. Let's get into it. This week on the meta report, we have a grand total of 40 decks we're looking at. We didn't explore the individual stats of last week, so we combined last week and this week to get a full scope of what the meta has looked like the last several weeks. As you can see here, it's a lot more of the same. We have 20 total Ruby Amethyst top 8 decks. The next closest number is 5 Amber Steels. Then we have 3 Emerald Steel, 3 Amber Amethyst, 3 Amethyst Steel, and 3 Amber Ruby. And then we close it off with 1 Sapphire Ruby, 1 Amber Emerald, and 1 Sapphire Steel. There we go again, guys. Ruby Amethyst is still kind of towering over everything else combined on this specific list. Literally every other deck right there. You pile them all up on top, and they actually 50-50 split with Ruby Amethyst. So complete and utter domination the last few weeks of Ruby Amethyst in top 8 appearances. It also won a 168-player event this weekend. So all that hodgepodge about it not being able to win events is a little crazy at this point. It just won a gigantic one. I think there was at least 3 Ruby Amethyst in at every top 8 reported. Some of them had 6, some of them had 4, some of them had 3. The deck's not going anywhere, guys. It's really ridiculous. It is one of the decks we're going to be looking at today because, of course, we have to. But let's get into the 7 decks that were really, truly successful. Some very unique ones, and some nice and interesting facts to look at from the past couple weeks. Emerald Steel found its way into 3 top 8s over the last couple of weekends. Now, there were some very interesting versions of the deck. As you can see here, we had a second place finish in the event of 163 players in Spain. This is the more traditional version of Emerald Steel. However, it includes the wonderful Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo. Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo was one of the cards during spoiler season that everyone really got excited for. The song and its ability to bounce characters and get secondary effects over and over again truly was something to be excited for. In this deck, it's looking to capitalize on that through Lucifer and Tinkerbell. It also has the ability to flat remove multiple items with Benjin, and if there is some problematic damage on your beast, you can, when in doubt, just sing with the beast, remove him from the game, put him back in your hand, put him back into play, and he's at full health again to kind of continue your draw engine. At its core, this is a Prince John deck. Prince John in combination with Hypnotize and Sudden Chill, along with 2-cost Flynn Rider, allows for a subtle amount of discard to go a long way. Of course, the big hit is Lucifer. We talked about this before in one of the most exciting combinations in the game. Prince John into Lucifer into Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo has the potential to just strip your opponent's complete hand and draw you several cards, all for the price of that combination. While it feels a bit of Christmas landy, I think this deck does a really good opportunity for making that sum total all come together. Emerald Steel is a deck that has continuously shown success in small margins within the metagame. Picking up top 8s here and there have been nice to see for the Emerald combination. However, I think this is, without a doubt, the most successful we've seen it so far to date. Second place in a 163-person tournament, that's a lot of success to really look at. And I think this deck is one of the more complete versions of a list that I've seen. Honestly, I played against something similar to this a couple weeks ago in League Play. It was actually my only loss on the day. And I was very impressed with really everything it was able to do, even though the deck does show some glaring weakness, like hilariously against other opposing steel decks, because Grab Your Swords completely kind of wrecks your entire board state. But that's okay, because if everyone's playing Ruby Amethyst and no one's playing Grab Your Swords, then it doesn't matter, guys. You just play your cards and you just win the game. It's fine. I do think this is a deck that you should pick up, give a shot, and give a try if you're of the Emerald Steel fans. I think this is one of the more complete versions of the deck that I've seen to date. Amber Steel picked up a second place finish in the 242 player Lorcana Play Network event that was hosted on Pixelborn a few weeks ago. This list, if you ask me, is a pretty standard stock list of what Amber Steel is capable of. The choice here is to play Lantern over Flute, and it's hard to argue that this deck can't be successful that way. We've seen kind of a 50-50 split almost between Lanterns and Flutes at this point, and this is more of an understanding of I'm just going to play my good cards and I'm going to win the game because I played my good cards. Very much more into the steel wheel aspect of it, of trying to find a whole new worlds as quickly as possible and deliver on promising turns and really punishing your opponent for misguided information. Amber Steel is honestly a deck that I felt like I've beat to death on this channel, so I don't really need to go into it too much further. It's not shocking to me at all to still see these lists be successful. It's a very good deck, and it's really a deck that, in the hands of the right pilot, will always have a chance to be successful. The choice between Lantern and Flute is probably going to be an argument until the end of time, and kind of just is what it is. I think you should just take your play style. If you like flutes, play flutes. If you don't like flutes, play lanterns, and just kind of go with the flow of what you enjoy about Disney Lorcana, because I don't think either deck is wrong. I just think it's kind of how you want to play the game and what you want to do in a given metagame. All in all, shout out, congratulations, second place in a 240 plus person tournament. That is something to be proud of for sure, regardless of the platform or where it was. Amber Amethyst found its way into a top 8 at PPG Holiday Matsuri last weekend. Now, this is a deck that we have continuously seen versions of be successful. At PPG GalaxyCon a few weeks ago, it actually won the event. This version, however, is quite different from the last one. One of the most interesting things that I have found about Amber decks right now is they are in very much dire need of a 3-cost bodyguard to be a backup to Zimba. This deck plays right into that. We go back to the old roots of Lemon Line, and we played just in time to complement Goofy and Maximus, 2 bodyguards in the game that are pretty difficult to remove that early on. Maximus and Goofy both survive a opposing Madame Mim Fox challenge, and they even get to remove the fox in the process. However, it also has one other addition at the 5 ink cost character in Eudora. The 1/9 2 lore is absolutely a threat to the game when played on turn 3. Honestly, if you're able to play that character on turn 3, yes, she only has 1 strength, but 9 willpower will probably net you 6 lore in most cases on turn 3. There just isn't enough ways to get rid of a 9 willpower character on turn 3 for it not to go that distance. And ironically, it's a wonderful pairing with Rapunzel, because unless your opponent can actually remove the character in one fell swoop in one turn, I just don't think it's possible, which means Rapunzel gets to draw you 3 cards fairly easily. It's nice to see a different approach to this list. I do think it's a little more hand dependent, and it can be a little strenuous on certain opening hands. Having so many uninkables in the deck could really come back to bite you. But in the end, I think that this is a very interesting take. I think the 3-cost concept of just in time to put in Maximus or Goofy really does go a long way in really just pressuring the game even further if you can keep your Lilos and Maleficents and Pinocchios hidden behind giant bodyguard walls. I really am interested to see if this is a version of the deck that might stand to be successful moving forward. Time will tell, but all in all, it's nice to see a change of pace for a strategy that seems pretty straightforward. If you've been enjoying this content so far and you really like the meta reports, hit me up in the comments and let me know what deck you've been playing recently, what you've seen success with. Is Ruby Amethyst ruining all of your tournaments? And if it isn't, is it because you're playing it? No, but seriously, if you're enjoying the content so far, smash that like button for me. If you're new here, hit subscribe. And I really want to talk about, guys, listen, if you're looking for a way to support the Forbidden Mountain, there's 3 easy ways to do it. The first, click the join button on the channel right below. Hit me with a super chat, whatever you want to do. Let me know anything you want to know. That's number one. Number two, we have a Patreon. Our Patreon, right in the link, right in the description below. You can check it out, see what that has to offer. And last, if you want to support us, you can pick up a shirt, pick up an attire, a hoodie, a water bottle, whatever. Lots of ways to support the TFM. Hit me up. All that stuff is in the description. Let's get into the next deck. Amethyst Steel in recent weeks has had a ton of success. This is one of 3 decks that made top 8s in reported events across the world. The other thing is to note is that there was a 4th deck that went 7-1 in the 242 player event through the Lorcana Play Network that was also quite similar to this list. Now, while this deck has continuously evolved over the weeks, it really is starting to show its true colors within the metagame. Figuring out the endgame of Elsa and Tinkerbell is definitely an interesting choice to note, but having the ability to recover from a Be Prepared so easily truly does go a long way for this deck. Captain Hook, while vulnerable in opposing steel matchups, is pretty much a solid card in every other matchup, being able to take out characters on trade such as Snake even at a lower cost. The addition of Prince Eric does the same thing. These Challenger 2 characters have the ability to trade into characters like Snake and like Mim, like Benjin, like Ariel, and any other of these 3 willpower characters that the game is starting to evolve into. Of course, the nod to playing Smash is just another layer to that. The one thing that honestly is the most shocking about this deck is that it's only playing 3 copies of Friends on the other side, when that's one of the more free cards in the game to cast, and only having 3 is definitely lessening your overall odds of casting that card when you want to. It's definitely probably a card that I would tick up very easily, and in all honesty, Let the Storm Rage On, for me personally, is only a 4 of an Amber list with Cinderella Ballroom Sensation. Outside of that, a lot less impressed with the card overall, so I think it's an easy swap, and you might just find yourself in a slightly more consistent version of this deck itself. Amethyst Steel has been one of the more fun decks to play in the metagame. It's the deck that I have gravitated towards the most. I've been playing it each week in my league events. Honestly, ton of fun. Definitely a different feel play style, but I'm also a huge Tinkerbell fan, so I think that's really why I gravitate towards it more. I do play a slightly more aggressive version of this. If you want to check out my version, you can check out the description in the Patreon, where it's the 4 decks that I've been playing. But this deck right here is definitely on the rise. We've seen it success after success after success. For 3 straight weeks now, we've had at least one of these in the top 8. And now, coming off the last 2 weeks, we've had several of these. I actually expect to see this deck come out more and more, in all honesty. This version doesn't have Ursula. You can play Ursula. This version is more reliant on Elsa and Tinkerbell. You don't even have to do that if you don't want to. There's so many different ways to build and mold this deck, and I think that that's the real interesting part, is we're still trying to figure out what the best version of this deck is. Should I be playing Arthur? It's up to you, in all honesty. I think there's a lot left to be seen for this, and I'm really excited to see how this deck will continue to grow as the metagame continues moving forward. Ruby Amber, featuring Mufasa, was another top 8 deck at the 163 player event in Spain. This deck had the best overall record after Swiss in that quite large event. Honestly, if you look at this list and you go, hey, there's 57 characters and 3 lanterns. Yep, that's a Mufasa deck. I broke Mufasa honestly down at length in the last meta report as a potential deck that really has this ability to just pressure opponents at every aspect of the game. This deck has 57 characters. You are always going to have lore in play. You're really kind of just walking into the concept of all of my characters in my deck mostly either do something when I play them, or have incredible shift abilities, or when they get banished, they also get to do things. Lots of ways to pressure opponent in this game. The addition of Scar is one that I really have enjoyed. This is a character that I've been playing more and more recently in more aggressive strategies that don't want to rely on their own Be Prepareds. I think Scar does a really wonderful job when played correctly, and it's a nice little nod here. It's only a 1 of in this list, but there's potential for that to be a 2 or 3 of, in all honesty. This is another deck that has just over the last several weeks really been showing up. We've seen it in multiples at other events, and this is just no different. This deck really has the potential to kind of just pressure your opponent into making bad decisions. I'll have to see how this deck really does start to evolve as more and more players recognize its strength and its power, and hopefully maybe it is one of the more meta-breaking decks that we're going to see in the Rise of the Fallen board metagame. Now, Sapphire Steel has only had one top 8 in the last several weeks reported. However, I was told a few weeks ago it was the undefeated in a top 16 cut in Florida, and it lost in top 16. So while it was an undefeated deck going into the top cut, it did catch a loss. So I'm going to count that a little bit as a 2 of in the last several weeks for the Sapphire Steel deck. I think when you look at this deck, it really does scream different. Adapting the Hyrim and Popsicles for a little more synergy and consistency within the deck for additional draw power goes a long way in the understanding of how powerful Popsicles might be in every Sapphire deck. And playing Hyrim is not the worst thing you can be doing in any deck. I might particularly like to see a few more items out of it, even if it's just a Beast Mirror as like a singleton, maybe a 2 of, just some other cheap, efficient item that you can put in play to get additional effect out of later, or you don't feel too bad about getting rid of with your Hyrim when he comes down. However, this deck is much more focused on the Fishbone Quill. Fishbone Quill, Mickey Detective are 2 different ways to accelerate your game plan even faster. This deck has the capability of spinning out turn 4 Grab Your Swords when necessary. Whether it be casting Grab Your Swords for its total cost or shifting in a big Cinderella, you have the options and ability to kind of get away with that. Bell also allows for really big ink turns. Being able to play a Fishbone Quill on 3, accelerate yourself a resource, play Bell on 4, accelerate yourself a resource, accelerate yourself another resource with Fishbone Quill can really put the game out of hand. And then by the time you ever get to the point of casting a whole new world, you probably are up 3 or 4 resources on your opponent to get the most use out of your deck. While traditionally the Amber Steel wheel decks were some of the better versions, of course, with the addition of Singers in the metagame, honestly, this deck has a lot of legs. A Whole New World is a very powerful card, and when paired with Bell and Fishbone Quill, giving yourself so much more resource advantage over your opponent, it's kind of a weird and interesting tempo version of the deck. While Amber Steel Wheel is kind of dedicated to getting rid of its hand as early as possible and then singing out A Whole New World, this deck is looking to do it in the opposite route of utilizing all the cards in your hand to get ahead on resources to then cast A Whole New World to find more threats to play with your additional resources. Either way, the deck packs a ton of punch, and because of Cogsworth Grandfather Clock, it's actually good in the mirror. The deck also has a lot of legs in recovery against Be Prepared, which makes its matchups against Ruby Amethyst not so bad either. In all honesty, I think this is one of the decks that might be slightly more difficult to play and understand the true game plan and script, which is why we haven't seen more of it being successful. There's also a very good chance that your hands can be a little clunky and hard to get out of, which is, of course, another one of the more problematic things. So while the deck might be powerful, its consistency is proving to be problematic. So I think if players can figure out a bit better of a way to make this deck slightly more consistent, we might find a little more success of this moving forward and honestly into 2024 and whatever events might be coming up. Ruby Amethyst, once again, 20 decks of the 40 decks covered in this video. Guys, it's just not going away. This deck right here was the winner of the 163-player event in Spain. And in all honesty, if you really look at this deck, it's hard to find a weak spot in this particular list. For me right now, Amethyst is just doing everything that you can possibly imagine and want out of a single ink color. Having draw power, having a way to win the game, having large threats, having replacement effects, having the ability to stabilize the game early and late, having an item that can conditionally gain you lore. It truly is just doing everything you want it to do, and this deck is encompassing all of those things. Ursula recently has had a resurgence in the metagame because the realization that if this deck had a weak spot to steal, it can be fixed by playing large characters. And what better character to play than a card like Ursula that has 8 willpower, 3 lore, can take a lore from your opponent, and replace yourself when played. In addition to that, it has characters as simple and subtle as Olaf, a 1-cost 1/3 that can survive a Teeth and Ambitions play when necessary, very likely to come back to your hand on turn 2 when needed for Mim Fox or Mim Snake later on, and all the while having cards like Merlin Goat and Merlin Rabbit to pressure the game throughout. Crazy enough for me, the 2 weak spots of this particular list, and I wouldn't even call them fair weak spots, are Maleficent Sorceress and Yzma. If you were looking for anything at all to replace in this list, I'd argue that that's where you could start. But if I were to take an honest thought about the Ruby Amethyst list and everything that it can do and the power that it has, I think this is a perfect deck list for the archetype so far. It really does cover all the bases, and it has all of the cards that you need to be successful within the metagame currently. So even if you took this exact list, sleeved it up yourself, and took it to an event, the next event you were going to play in, I'm sure you would find close to near the same success that this player did in this event. Ruby Amethyst is just that good. Amethyst is just that good. The success is not going away. It's only honestly getting crazier at this point, saying that through 40 decks, it encompassed 50% of the top 8 meta decks over the last several weeks. The stats are getting crazier and crazier. The results are not changing. Yes, we're seeing spur of the moments and other interesting archetypes get some love, but by comparison, it's just not there. Ruby Amethyst is without a doubt the most consistent deck in the game. And I don't even know that at this point we're even going to be able to stop that or prevent that moving forward, because all of the other decks that I've reported on today have a consistency issue. That's the reason, the core reason we're not seeing more success from them is because they're just less consistent than the Amethyst Inc. as a whole. If you want to hear more thoughts about the Ruby Amethyst deck, you can check out the video right here. Thank you guys so much for watching today. Smash that like button for me if you enjoy information like this. We do this weekly. Of course, the next one will be next year. First video of 2024 will be the meta report. So thank you guys so much again. We'll catch you in the next video.